1 second. Did we go live yet, Audra?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Hold on a second. Oh, we're live. Okay. We're live, Cali. So I'm going to share it to my page. It's live now, Audra. So I'm going to share it to my page. Turn it down, Audra. It's going to. Is it on my personal page yet, Audra? It is on my personal page?
Yeah.
Okay, let me just make sure we have it here, Cali. All right, we're live. Okay, so do you want to
Fine.
share it, Cali, real quick?
Yep.
You let me know when you're ready. I'll do my spiel.
Go ahead, do your spiel. I'm
All right.
sharing to my groups.
All right, everybody, welcome once again to the Drug and Alcohol Attorneys Facebook Live Show. And I am super excited to have with us Dr. Cali Estes, also known as the Interventionist to the Stars, also known as the female Dr. Drew. So, Cali, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on. And before we get started, you know what I'm going to do? This is what I'm going to do.
Afraid to ask.
Oh, listen, I'm a lot more afraid of you than you are of me. So here's the thing. 2 weeks ago, we had Tara Connor on the show.
Oh, here we go.
I'm going to give you your fair dues because I earned this. And it's certainly all back to you. So 2 weeks ago, we had Tara Connor on the show. And actually, Cali was supposed to come on 2 weeks ago. And I'd had a text message from her agent indicating that Tara could only come on literally the week that Cali was scheduled. And I said, Cali, listen, is there any chance we could move you a couple of weeks? And she said, well, who are you putting on? And I said, actually, Cali was supposed to come on 2 weeks ago.
Sorry. It's now shared to my page.
Okay. And she said, well, who are you putting on? I said, well, I'm putting on Miss USA, Tara Connor. And Tara, Cali being the good sport said, okay, fine, I'll do it. So I just want to publicly not only apologize, but say thank you, because I've received a little bit of flack for that from you, probably well earned and deserved, but I want to say thank you for doing that for me, because I know that you are a very busy lady, and I very much all right, fine, come on. I very much, and by the way, for the folks that are watching this, if it looks like we're, there's a love-hate relationship here, there is. And I do know her husband, so I'm comfortable saying that. but
Let's just be honest. You dumped me for the hot chick. I get it. I get it. You guys are all the same. That's exactly what happened.
Okay, I can live with that. I'm okay with that. I'm all right with that. So, Cali, thank you for coming on the show today. We're excited to have you. And I want to talk all about, because you've written some controversial stuff, and we're going to talk all about that. And so let's get into this. So you work in the addiction field, and tell us a bit about what you do.
So I do recovery coaching, intervention, counseling. I have a signature product called Sober on Demand, where I take the treatment center to the client, which is like taking the treatment out of the treatment. And we do everything with the client. We have a launchpad program, which is aftercare. So after they come out of the treatment center, we have them for 30 to 45 days. We're hands-on. We're kind of in their face, trying to help them change their pathways and change the things that they're doing. And I specialize in higher end clients and failure to launch. So also the kids that don't ever leave the house or leave the nest, I also work with them as well.
Okay, so I know that you travel all over the country doing interventions, right?
We do intervention, we do coaching, Sober on Demand, which is bringing the treatment to them, and then the aftercare. We do a lot of different things besides intervention, but that's one of them.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit in time, because you've got a great story and it's really interesting, and I want to share it with the audience. But how long have you been working in the addiction field? 25
years.
Okay, and tell us a bit about your background in terms of training and education and stuff like that.
So I started in a prison at SCI Rockview, and I did my internship there with the drug and alcohol guys and really enjoyed it. And my bachelor's is from Penn State, which is right next door to SCR Rockview. That's in psychology. Then I went to Westchester and studied criminal justice because I wanted to be an FBI agent. And I learned quickly on FBI agents don't make a whole lot of money, and fetching coffee really wasn't what I wanted to do. So I entered the addiction space and started with the nonprofit world. So I was doing nonprofit for Runaway Home with Girls. I worked in juvenile detention. I did a high-end home for boys, and then women with kids, which was nonprofit. I also learned that I worked a lot of hours. I made a little bit of money, and I was highly stressed because addiction doesn't stop, and it's extremely stressful. So I spent the first 8 years or so of my career doing that, and then I took a break, and I said I needed some downtime.
So you were born in Pennsylvania? Because you said you were going to Penn State. So were you born in Pennsylvania?
Born and raised, yeah.
So what was life like for you growing up? Tell me a little bit about that.
I'm from Pottstown, which is not the best town in the world, although my friends watching are going to stone me. And it wasn't very enjoyable. My father was bipolar. He was very abusive. So I couldn't wait to leave. My whole goal was get through high school and get out. Get out of this town and do something with your life. Most people in my town never leave. They stay, they get married, they have kids, they stick it out. And that's not what I wanted for myself. I wanted to go. So as soon as I had the opportunity, I was out.
Okay. So tell us a little about your family history, because a lot of the folks I have on the show, they talk about their family history, and it's sort of almost like a perpetuating story of addiction and mental illness. So tell us a bit about like what your family was like when you're growing up.
So my father and mother were married till I was 13, and my father was a serial cheater. He's been married 5 times or 4 times. He's got kids all over, and he was very abusive to my mother. So my mother would kind of turn a blind eye and go to church and pray, and nothing would ever change. And she would pray and nothing would ever change. So my grandmother kind of stepped in and tried to raise us, and she's sort of borderline, so that didn't work very well. And there wasn't drugs and alcohol. It was all mental health, except for my mother, who had some food addiction. But from there, that made me want to study what was wrong with my family, because we didn't have money for vacations. There was a point where I had enough clothes for 1 week of school and 2 pairs of shoes. That was it. I would rotate them the following week. I always wore the same thing because we didn't have the money. We didn't have it. My father spent it on women and whatever he did on his own time. So that perpetuated me into learning about psychology. And I ended up studying addiction because I wanted to do my internship at the prison with the sex addiction guys and the sex addicts and the crazy people. And the warden said, because I'm female, and I was the first female ever to do an internship at this prison, I'm 5'2". He said, you will not work with those guys. You can't. It's not possible. You get to work with the drug addicts. And I said, that's boring. And he goes, trust me, it's not boring. You'll have a field day.
It'll be safe too, right?
You'll be safe. Yeah. So what I got to do, which was really cool. So my mentor there with the drug and alcohol guys was awesome. And then he sort of farmed me out to every other department. So I got to see the mental health side. I got to see the sex addiction side. I got to see all of it, which was really cool, even the violent offenders. So I got to see how each one was treated from a therapy perspective differently. And he taught me tips and tricks. He was ex-CIA, so I learned all about NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. I knew how to read body language. It was fascinating, and I was really good at it. When I finished my internship, I went into the nonprofit world and learned that I was really good because the techniques he taught me, no one taught you in a book. There's the things you couldn't learn anywhere. And that is what made me really good working in addiction, because just by looking at somebody, whether it's online or in person, I could get a lot of information. He also showed me how to do it by listening. So I don't even have to see the person. I can hear them on the phone, and I can go through several different things in my head and come up with a synopsis, and I'm usually right. So that was really cool.
So listen, let me back you up for a second, because there was some interesting stuff that happened in your childhood. I know that there was an incident with your dad, and I want to talk to us about that. And then I want to talk to you, tell me about because I know you went and lived with your grandmother at some point, and that had an influence on you too. So let's just back up for a second, because I think that when people understand sort of the perspective of where you come from, that I think that maybe that'll help them to understand why you're really, really good at what you do. So, and why you're in such demand.
Sure. So my dad was very abusive. So he would do things like he would give you something and then take it back and then swore you stole it. And then he would beat us because we stole it. I shouldn't say us, I should say me. And then at one point he would play Russian roulette. He was real into guns. He used to have a gun shop. and he had a 22, which he taught me how to shoot, and he would load it and spin the chamber, and he would put it to my head and pull the trigger. And his theory was the bullet was heavy, so it would fall to the bottom. So the first 1 to 3 shots are not kill shots. That was his thing. And then he'd put it to his head and go, see, we're both alive. And he would play this little game. And when you were little, at first it's terrifying. And then it's like, oh, okay. Because for a series of times it hasn't gone off, it's not going to go off as a child. So that kind of made me more of a badass than anything. Because my theory was if I can get through this situation with my father, and he was condescending. He would call me stupid, fat, and ugly and tell me I'll never get married, and I'll never have a degree, and I'm too stupid, and blah, blah, blah. I fueled that to do what I want to do. Most people would have, internalized that and said, he's right. I didn't do that. I said, watch me. The best vengeance or revenge is to succeed, because then the person has nowhere to go with that. And that was my theory.
Okay. So at some point you went and lived with your grandmother, right?
My mother, well, we all did. My father, my mother, and my sister all moved in with my grandmother because my grandfather died and my grandmother had a meltdown. And
Right.
then my grandmother and my father butted heads, and finally my mom filed for divorce 2 years later, so they threw my father out. And we all just lived there with my grandmother.
Okay. Do you think you had any issues?
Honey, I still have issues. You're talking to me, for God's sakes.
Okay. All right. So you go to live with your grandmother. I think you said that at 14 you had a bit of what's the word I'm looking for? A U-turn in life. How's that?
A U-turn.
In
What do you
terms
mean?
of you rebelled against the whole.
Yeah. So my mother's religious. Her mother's religious. They're Catholic. They would drag me to church on Sunday. They would drag me to church on Easter. They would drag me to church on Christmas. And I had questions that no one could answer. And I would ask these questions. We were in CCD. We were in Catholic school. I did 6 years of Catholic school. So I would ask questions and they couldn't answer them for me. So the more questions I had, the less answers I got. I started.
I want to know what was you found that you were sort of inquisitive about.
So my first question was, when you go to church, the people in the front, it's a male priest with male altar boys, right? Where are the women? I want to know where the girls are. And they always said to me, well, girls can't be up there. They can read the book, they read the pulpit stuff, but they can't, perform a mass. And I said, well, why not? And this is the priest and I in front of a whole room full of people, and I horrified my grandmother. And he goes, well, girls just don't do that. And he laughed at me. And when he laughed at me, I stood up and I said, just because girls don't have a fucking penis, they can't do what you do. And that was the culmination of maybe I shouldn't be in the Catholic Church. My grandmother was horrified. She stood up and went, oh my God. I'm like, what? What did I say? Well, first of all, you said the F word. Then you said the P word. You can't say either word. I'm like, well, that's what it's called. We don't say that here. It was a big mess.
And you said them together in the same sentence.
Yes. And then it was, well, maybe you shouldn't be part of this because you don't understand it. And I said, well, I'm asking questions you're not answering. So that kind of fueled my rebellion. And I came home that day and I turned all the crosses upside down and I put black on and I said, I'm going to study Satanism. And my grandmother was like, oh, not just, let's just, go a little to the left. I'm like going to take it all the way to the left. So I studied that. And then I studied witchcraft. And then I studied Taoism and Buddhism and shamanism. And I went on a spiritual quest. I was like, well, I can't find where I belong because this is not where I belong. Somewhere out there is where I belong. And I started studying stuff. And eventually I got to do a sweat lodge with the Lakota tribe. And I got to do some really cool drumming circles. And that's sort of my thing. That's where I fit. But I didn't know where I was at 14. And it was hard trying to figure out how to assimilate when I didn't fit with what they believed. Now, had they taken time to explain things to me, it may have worked, but they chose not to.
Now, what about your own issues with addiction? Because I know that you had told me you liked food, and then that sort of caused you to have an issue with diet pills and things of that nature.
Yeah. So growing up, my mother's solution for stress was let's eat. My mother's solution for birthday was let's eat. Everything was food. We didn't have a lot of money, so we would bake a cake and celebrate whatever it was. That for me translated into every time I have a problem or a feeling, I eat. And it's always cake or Ben and Jerry's. And it wasn't just a little. It wasn't like I could have, a scoop of Ben and Jerry's, put it away. I would eat 2 or 3 at a time. And I wouldn't throw up. I would just restrict food for the next 2 days. So I ended up in college, I was sitting on the floor at one point. All of my roommates would come home with different boys that they'd meet at the bar, and I never picked anybody up. I was that girl. I was always the wingman. So I'd come home alone and I'd eat cake. And one day I was sitting on the floor and I was stuffing the cake with my hands, and there's cake everywhere. It was on me, on the walls, on the dog. It was everywhere. And my roommate walked in. I'll never forget. She goes, "Dude, there's something wrong with you." Just shook her head. And I'm like, "What?" So I went to the counselor. Counselor opens up the DSM, which is our diagnostic manual. And she goes, "Well, you don't meet criteria for eating disorder. And other than stress, I don't know what to do." So she sent me to the fat doctor. The fat doctor said, "Well, you need to lose weight." He put me on fen-phen. Well, fen-phen is no good. We know that now. That led
heart damage, no?
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That led to RIP fuel.
There was a whole class action lawsuit about that, and I lived on RIP fuel in college, in law school, by the way. I mean,
so that's where I went, right to RIP fuel, which is mahalang, guarana, and ephedra. That stack was amazing, and I went from 160 pounds to 90 pounds at 5'2", and I could eat anything, and I thought it was awesome. And fast forward 2.5, almost 3 years later, I started having heart problems, and I kept ignoring it. I started having energy issues. I blew out my adrenals, and I just kept ignoring it. And it got to the point where I started having panic attacks, and I ended up in the ER. And a doctor said to me, "You need to stop." And of course I said, "I'm not going to, there's nothing wrong with me. You don't know what you're talking about." Well, the doctor wasn't versed in addiction. So his solution was, "Well, you'll figure it out." Sent me home. And I ended up again in the ER. And this is when I had a doctor sit me down, and he was, I'll never forget. He was very crass, but it was very good. And he said, "You're going to kill yourself at 23. And he used the F word. And that got my attention. And I went, "Okay." And he goes, "You need to come off this." So I detoxed myself, because back then, I didn't have health insurance. I mean, what kid in their early 20s has health insurance? So I ended up detoxing on the floor of my condo, and it was rough. And then I got through it, and I went, wow, I'm an addict. I identify as an addict. I fit the profile as an addict. So I started really, really delving into addiction. At this point, I'd already had my degree, and I was working on my master's degree at this point in criminal justice. So my master's took a turn, and I started studying addiction. All my electives are addiction in my master's. And I started realizing, just because you're not an addict or you're not raised in an addictive family, you can have addictive tendencies, and the right storm of circumstances happen, and you reach for whatever that is. It could be anything: the phone, shopping, sex, gambling, anything. Whatever it is, that's what you reach for. Exercise, and then it becomes too much.
Wow. It's crazy. So at some point, I think I wrote down here, you went back to get your PhD, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. I went back and got my clinical psychology degree and life coaching.
Okay. Tell us what you did your dissertation, your PhD dissertation in, because it's really interesting.
Differential association and the Hells Angels.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about that, because I'm pretty sure no one's done a PhD dissertation on the Hells Angels.
Well, I've always been interested in gangs and cults, because for me, to be in a gang or be in a cult, you have to have a weak mind. You have to be led. You have to be allowing yourself to be led.
Sorry.
So
go ahead.
Was that your new girlfriend from last week? 2 weeks ago?
No. You're never gonna let me live this down, are you?
Nope.
I mean,
You threw me off for a more attractive woman. What am I supposed to say to that? Thanks, Mark.
We're live, so I'm just going to keep my mouth shut. And as a kid, the defense lawyer will tell you, sometimes you just got to take the fifth and stay quiet. Besides the fact, I also know that you're a whole lot smarter than me, so I'm never arguing with you. So
you've got as many pieces of paper up there as I do. That one on the right, what is that one? Is that fitness, or what is that?
Fitness? No, that's my master's in law. That's the Supreme Court saying I'm licensed to practice. This behind me is my law degree. And actually on the far right over there, which I don't think you can see, is my undergrad degree from Michigan.
You went to Michigan State?
I beg your pardon. Not your the University of Michigan.
All
right, come on, you're getting me off topic here. So let's get back to the Hells Angels, because that's really fun stuff. So
okay. So I wanted to know what was different. I wanted to know how these things operate, because my mother was very weak-minded with my father. And my father was very domineering. And I watch how narcissistic men and overbearing men control women. There's a certain level of abuse. And I wondered, is that the same in cults, and how are these things set up? And what I learned was very interesting. So the Hells Angels runs like a government. They have a president, a secretary, a vice president, a treasurer, a whole board, and nothing gets done unless it's voted upon, which is really interesting. It wasn't just like they go out and, pillage and steal and, make drugs, which is what you think. They don't. And it's run a certain way. And I studied the warlocks, and I went, okay, they don't operate like the Hells Angels. They're more of a free for all. So it's kind of interesting. And then I started studying cults, and I didn't have enough room in my dissertation for all of it, but I studied Jim Jones, and I studied Waco, and the Halesbach guy. And I was looking at this, and I was like, this is so interesting how these guys single-handedly, I mean, even Charles Manson, he never killed anybody. He got people to actually do something for him. And I looked at that, and I saw how our society, what it does, how it gets people to do things we want, if that makes sense. Right. And when we question things, things shift, which is what happened to me with the Catholic religion. I had questions, and I kind of got pushed away, and I went the other direction. So, not saying that it's a cult or anything, but it operated very similar. So I was very interested when I did my dissertation in all of this stuff and how it operates.
Okay, so let's go back because you said you worked in the prisons. I think you said you told me at one point you worked for a non-for-profit, right? You worked in the juvenile justice system.
I worked for all nonprofit until I went back. Even that was nonprofit. I worked for all nonprofit until 2011. 2011 was the first for-profit treatment center I worked for.
Okay, so let's go back because there's a period of time back in 2004 where you just were like, I'm done with this, right? And you took some time off. So what was the catalyst for you to say, look, I'm done. I'm just not going to work in the addiction field anymore?
I was tired of not making any money, tired of working 60 to 70-hour work weeks, tired of being yelled at by clients. When you work with clients in addiction, they call you every name in the book. They don't want to be there. They don't want to be sober. And as a therapist, you're expected to take that on a daily basis and not get paid very well for it. And then be told, well, you're in an industry that doesn't make any money and you should give back. And bullshit. That's bullshit. If I'm going to work and bust my ass for all that, I want to be paid. And I want to make sure my light doesn't get shut off because I'm tired and I'm exhausted with all these clients. So my thought process was, eventually, when I got into private practice, I'm going to work with addicts either way. I'd at least like to be paid for it.
Right. Well, I mean, when you were working for non-for-profits and working those 60 hours, were you really struggling financially?
Oh, God, yeah. I could barely. You figure, here you are, you've got a house, a rent payment, you have a car payment, you have a student loan payment, and then you're supposed to eat on top of it all, and a gym payment. I couldn't do it. I was always in the negative.
Wow. And I know the time, now you're married, but at the time you were single, right? You weren't a married woman.
I was single. Yes.
Okay. So basically, it was just you, yourself, and I. Well,
Yeah.
So no safety net, nobody there paying your bills if you don't get paid. If the electricity doesn't get paid, get shut off.
Mark, it's the same way now. Married or single, it's the same way now. I married a musician.
Well, no, my point is when I say you weren't married, is that it's just you were just on your own. I mean, there was nobody really even emotionally there to support you. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah, doing my own thing.
Right. So in 2004, you moved, right? You moved to Texas.
I packed everything up in my car, and I was on my way to California, and my friend said, go to Texas, it's cheaper. You'll never make it in California. So I went to Texas, I went to Dallas, and I learned a couple things. I learned, oh my God, it's cheaper. I could have a nice condo for a quarter of what I was paying in Pennsylvania with central air. I could have my big dog. It was great, but I couldn't find work. The problem was, in addiction back then, there were very few treatment centers that wouldn't hire you if you had nonprofit. If you're nonprofit, you're supposed to stay nonprofit. If you were for-profit, you stay for-profit. And in Pennsylvania at that time, there were no for-profits. It was all nonprofit. There was one for-profit that was 2 hours away, and I was not commuting 2 hours each way a day to go to work. So I couldn't get a job in Texas. So I said, you know what? I had this $5 bin that I put my clothes in from Walmart. I flipped it upside down. I didn't even have money for a desk. And I put my computer on there, and my friend and I started a fitness company. And we grew it from nothing to the largest fitness company in the world. We went from $0 to 4.1 million in 3 years. And we did in-home fitness training.
Okay. So, I mean, how did you suddenly come up with an idea like that? I mean, you must have had some background in personal training and yoga. I mean, you did, right?
Yes, Mark, but that's not why I started it. So
I
my
understand that, but you did just say, "Oh, I mean, I'm going to climb Mount Everest. I don't know how to climb anything, but I mean, you know what I mean? That's kind of akin to what you did. I mean, you sort of
yeah.
took a little bit of knowledge and you figured out how to monetize it and do it and really make it pop."
Yep. So I'm a certified trainer, personal trainer. I'm also certified in yoga, certified in Pilates, and my business partner was a certified trainer who did in-home training before. So we sat down and said, let's monetize. No one's doing this. And it was right in that boom where people were buying houses they really couldn't afford and filling them full of junk. So it was perfect. And we did great. We had 1,000 trainers across the US. We had 17 in-house staff. We had a penthouse on Commerce Street in Dallas, which, if you guys know anything about Dallas, it's right down the street where Kennedy got shot. It was awesome. And all of a sudden, the economic downturn hit, the bottom dropped out. People couldn't afford their home, let alone their trainer. So you get rid of the things, your massage therapist, your pool boy, your personal trainer. Those are gone when you can't pay your mortgage. So we lost our company. And I had to move from California back to Pennsylvania, and everything I owned burned up in a fire. So I get there and I've got literally my laptop, my dog, my car, 2 changes of clothes, my djembe, and my camera. And I ended up in a house with no running water because I had no job. I had no money.
So where are you living? So when that happens, where are you living? Because the postal training business was based in Texas, right?
Yeah, but we had five offices throughout the country. So we had Texas, we had Houston and Dallas, we had LA, we had Phoenix, and we had Philadelphia. And I would travel from place to place to see what was going on.
Okay. So in 07, you were in LA. That's what I wrote down. Is that right?
Oh, 07, I was in LA, and then I moved back to Philadelphia.
Okay. So when you move back to Philadelphia, you're basically starting again because you've lost your business.
Yep.
It's you, the dog, and 2 bags of clothes, basically, right? And your laptop.
I had 2 sets of clothes. The clothes I had on and the clothes I had in the car. That was it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So how'd you start over again? What'd you do?
So, well, I had my mom donated her rental unit with no heat, no running water. She hates when I say this story. And that was it. So I kind of lived there. I had my gym membership, so I'd shower at the gym. And then I would go to Wawa every day and I'd buy myself a sandwich and a cup of coffee. So every day, that's all I ate. So I spent $5 on food every single day. And I just started applying to every job I could find because that was my theory. At least get a job, get income coming in, reevaluate. So it took me 3 months and I got this stupid job at Foundations in Doylestown. To this day, it's the worst job I've ever had. I had to answer the phone and pre-cert insurance. And they called me.
A treatment center?
Well, it was mental health for kids for treatment. Yeah. But I was admissions. And I'm like, I could run circles around every staff in there. And here I am answering the phone for $45,000. And I sat at my desk. I'm second shift, 2 to midnight. And I sat at my desk by myself because there was nobody there after 6 o'clock. And I said, what the F am I doing? And I said, I really got to get this together. So I called my old business partner and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, let's start a music company out of nowhere. I'm like, I can't stand the addictions field. They don't treat their people well. They don't pay their people well. And I'm a glorified secretary with a master's degree. This is stupid. So he goes, okay. So we created a music company and we started helping basically musicians to market because we knew marketing. With the fitness company, we were on the first page of Google. We understood pay-per-clicking. We understood how to make press kits. We did all this stuff. And keep in mind, this is just when Craigslist was coming up and the internet was just getting big. So we knew stuff musicians didn't know. We created a music company, and I ended up meeting my husband that way.
Oh, that's an interesting story. So you're basically managing rock bands, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so share with us the story about your husband because I've met him, and for those that haven't met or don't know Cali's husband, he's a super super great guy, really down to earth. But he's a rocker, right? I mean, you look at him like that guy must be in a rock band. But he's a really, really good guy. So I want you to share with us how you guys ended up sort of getting together.
Okay, so my husband, his band at the time it was the Deadlies in New York, and he contacted us to do some marketing for him. And I went up, met the band, and they're all in the eyeliner, all of it, hair, everything. And they were an attractive bunch of guys. There was 5 of them. So they hired us to do the marketing, and we did the marketing. He kept asking me out, but I, first of all, didn't know which one of the 5 he was. That was the first problem. I had no idea who was texting me. And the second problem was I don't date clients. So I kept saying no, no, no. And then he finally fired us. And he said, well, now we're not a client. So now you need to come up and have a date. And I said, give me a few reasons why I should go out with you. And his first one was, well, we both like music. And I said, you have to do better than that. He said, well, we both like to text. And this is back when you had flip phones. So you had to push each letter 3 times to get your text.
Right.
Yeah. So I said, okay, you have to do better than that. And he said, well, we both wear eyeliner. And I went, oh, I was always in love with Motley Crue, Tommy Lee growing up. Like, I'm going to marry that drummer, Tommy Lee, one day. And he goes, so that was 3. And I said, okay. And he goes, and number 4, we both love me. And I said, purely based on your narcissistic, self-absorbed asshole attitude, you have 1 date. He goes, I only need 1 date. You'll marry me. I said, no, I won't. And here I am.
And so how long have you guys been married now?
This July was 8 years. Together 10.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So